My mom's plan to serve my dad with divorce papers is very cruel. I'm helping her out. My parents' marriage is absolutely awful. My dad is the kind of person who will come home from work and get angry over nothing, usually threatening to lay hands onto mom. Growing up, my dad never treated my mother like an equal. She was expected to do all the housework and look after the children, and dote on her husband at all times. He treated her like a servant. Neither me nor my little sister have ever liked our dad. He is an a-hole who treats my mom poorly, has stolen from me and my sister at various points through our lives, and I never respected him for this. I recently got brunch with my mother and she dropped some pretty heavy news. She's planning on divorcing my father. I was honestly relieved and happy for her that she's finally doing this, but her plan to do so is rather troubling. My parents are Chinese immigrants. My dad's best friend Daniel and his family have been saving up for a trip to the USA for years. They will be visiting my parents over Christmas. My dad put the burden of this whole trip on my mother. He told her to organize their whole vacation, planning meals, reservations and activities. He also demanded she pay for it all out of her own account. Basically, my mom is expected to be the complete tour guide and handle all the stress and organization of their visit, including picking them up from the airport, while my dad just gets to hang out with his childhood friend and not deal with anything. My mom doesn't even know these people. Apparently, this was the last straw for my mom. She is retaliating. She has only been pretending to organize this trip and faked a bunch of reservations and stuff to appease my dad. My dad thinks everything is organized and Daniel's family is being completely taken care of. Her plan instead is to serve him with divorce papers the day she is supposed to pick up Daniel's family from the airport. My dad will be out of town on business up until the day Daniel arrives, so she will be moved out by then. Daniel's family will be stranded at the airport, and my dad will come home to an empty house and no family. I voiced my concerns to my mother about him finding out, and she basically was like, F it and F him. I barely talk to my father, but I don't know who I should reach out to. I do support her and did promise to help her out, now we just have to wait. My mom's plan to serve my dad with divorce papers is very cruel. I'm helping her out. I opted to do nothing to help my mother in terms of the divorce, but also decided not to tell my father anything. My mother's plan went into action. Around the time Daniel's family was to be picked up, I got a phone call from my father. I decided to ignore it, because I did not want to get wrapped up in the commotion. He called again and then sent me a series of texts, demanding to know the whereabouts of my mother. My dad was aware that Daniel's family had not been picked up, because Daniel obviously called my father. My mother was not answering her phone, but he did not know why, so he called me. He also called my younger sister, who said she genuinely had no idea what was going on, but also lived out of state so was unable to help. I eventually text my dad back saying I have no idea what is going on, but I'm very busy at work and won't be able to get back to him for a while. My dad, unable to find immediate answers, told Daniel there must have been some miscommunication. He told them to get a cab from the airport to the house and just make themselves at home until my father could get to them. He gave Daniel the key code to the house, told him to call back once Daniel and his family were safely at home. Here's where things get a bit theatrical. My mother apparently attached the divorce papers to an easel, with a nice big divorce label and note, and placed the easel right at the entrance hall to the house so it's the first thing you see once you open the door. So who gets the divorce news first? Daniel and his family. Daniel then has to tell my father that my mother is divorcing him. This is precisely what happens. Daniel recounts this in private to me later, which is how I know. Apparently my father went through a range of emotions, from disbelief, to a fumbling stutter to anger. This, by the way, is happening while he is at the Denver airport, surrounded by his colleagues. He then has to give some sort of explanation to his work friends and deal with an awkward and uncomfortable plane ride back home. Long story short, my dad was incredibly embarrassed and flustered. He had no idea what to do or how to help himself or anyone. Daniel actually ended up coming to the rescue, because he is apparently quite the meticulous planner and had many suggestions for activities and sightseeing. Basically, Daniel took charge of his own vacation for the first few days, while my dad fumbled around like a lost puppy, just tagging along their trip while being completely discombobulated. I expected my dad to put on a farce for Daniel and his family and pretend things were fine, but he was unable to do that at all. I think he legitimately and honestly believed that my mom would never leave him, and was too much at a loss for words to even be angry. Later on, I stepped in to help out Daniel's family and make sure they were doing okay, giving my dad some time to himself. The vacation was kind of awful. After the first few days, my dad's rage set in and he went off on Daniel and his family for no reason. While going off, he also cursed out his wife and even me. Daniel told me he felt very uncomfortable and kind of unsafe, considering my dad went on this rant when him and Daniel were drunk. My dad then threatened to fight Daniel, but Daniel managed to de-escalate the situation. The next day, Daniel and his family ended the vacation early. As for my parents, in general, they are only communicating through their lawyers. My mom moved out to her own apartment. She hasn't told my father where she lives, and I am completely staying out of it. My mom seems like a brand new person to me. I am incredibly happy for her for being so brave and finally taking charge of her own life. My dad is pathetic and completely helpless. He's been wrapping himself up in his work and eating lots of takeout, putting weight on daily. I do want this breakup to be as clean as possible, so I am not taking sides, but I will make sure my dad knows I never appreciated his behavior.